Thank you. Thanks, John. Appreciate the warm welcome, and it's great to be with you. So what I want to do today is share 3 best practices as it pertains to marketing attribution. And one of the things that's really important to me as a marketer is understanding where the pitfalls lie in measurement. And this has been something that I've been challenged with my entire career. And so what I want to share is just, we'll go over these 3 things. So number 1, just a quick story, how I almost got fired from my dream job. Number 2, the research and the state of the industry and where we are as it pertains to attribution and measurement. And number 3, the best practices associated with marketing attribution. So let's start with almost getting fired from my dream job. So it was back in 2002. It was my second job out of college, and I had just moved back from Boston to Utah, and I got this amazing opportunity with this little tiny company. It was about $10 million in sales, and it was called Ancestry.com. And at that time, they hired me to do third-party email marketing. Remember when that was a thing? Back in the day, I think I may be personally responsible for the canned spam legislation that was passed. I remember sending out about 300 million emails a month, if you can believe it. And so we were just trying to drive people to the Ancestry subscription. Trace your roots back to Adam, if you will. And so anyway, I had this wonderful opportunity. And they basically said that the CMO said, all right, Michael, you can drive as much growth as you can muster so long as you stay within a constrained ROI and don't go over X dollars per every customer acquisition. And I said, okay, that's easy. I know math. I got my spreadsheet out. And on one side of my spreadsheet, I took all my conversion data and all of our sales data and our proxy lifetime value data. And back in the day, this was when everybody was doing cost per acquisition, CPA advertising. It was very performance-based. And I thought, okay, I can back in with CPMs, and I know how to do this. So I took all of the impression data. I took all of the cost data across our billions of impressions, back when Classmates was a thing, and we were running on AOL Network and others. And I would match the data together. And it was amazing. It was fantastic. We started growing. I was responsible for display advertising back in 2002 and email marketing, third-party email, and I was growing these 2 different channels. And the ROI, I was staying within there, and we became the 7th largest online advertiser, billions of impressions, and we were growing really quickly. And we were growing 20 million, 30 million, 40 million in sales. We had over 1 million subscribers to Ancestry.com. And we were having a lot of success. And I was excited. This was my dream job at the time. And I remember the ROI was amazing. The conversion was looking really good. And I had about 5 colleagues. And across those 5 colleagues, one of them was responsible for paid search. Another one was responsible for the affiliate program. Another one was responsible for website conversion. Another one was responsible for a different channel. And so we were all looking at each other, and we were all growing our respective channels. And one day, someone came to us in the business intelligence team in finance and said, hey, you guys are all doing great, but I've got a question. If I add up all of the ROI across all of these channels, Ancestry.com should be about 60% bigger than it is. And I thought, well, that's impossible. What's wrong? And we all looked at each other, and we dug into it. And what had happened is we were all looking at our siloed data from across all these different channels. And guess what? We were double, triple, quadruple, quintuple counting conversions in some instances. And our CMO came to us and said, how could you guys have screwed this up so badly? And we thought, we were just looking at the data in our own respective channels. How is this possible that this is so broken? Well, obviously, we learned the lesson, and this was about 2005, that when you take data silos and you measure ROI within the silos, bad things happen. And we all almost got fired from our jobs. And anyway, we had a very understanding CMO who went to our board and said, you know what, we'll just chalk it up to brand advertising, all those extra impressions that you guys were serving that weren't driving ROI, and maybe there was some benefit associated with that. And so we said, okay, we learned the lesson. Since that moment, I decided to go on a personal crusade to solve the attribution problem. And what I want to do is just share next a little bit of the research associated with the state of the industry. Forgive me, I'm going to get just a drink of water here. So let me share some research. So top experience and challenges for marketers up here. Number one, attributing marketing performance. Number one, still, after 18 years of me doing this is still the top challenge that we face as marketers. Now, some of you may say, hey, I've got to grow the business, I've really, that's my top challenge, or I've got to retain customers. Those are all very valid challenges. And those are all things that we are faced with. But still, whether it's number 2 or 3, marketing attribution still is in the top set of challenges for us. So if we double click into that challenge, what's preventing trust and ROI and the attribution? And as we look at the research, here's what we see. Number 1, problem is inconsistent tracking across channels. It's tracking. Number 1 problem. And we're all using digitally, like UTM parameters and tracking spreadsheets and homegrown systems to do this, but it's still very inconsistent across channels. Number 2 problem is insufficient staff to aggregate and manage all the data. So once we've got it all in one place, then we try and clean it up. Number 3 problem, siloed data across multiple channels. That was my problem that almost got me fired. Number 4, incomplete data spanning multiple channels. Number 5, inconsistent data standards and tracking standards and metadata and classification standards, okay? Insufficient attribution models. So it's interesting because if you look at 1 through 5, it's data, 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 data. And lastly, the attribution models are still a problem, but if you apply bad data to any attribution model, regardless, you still have the garbage in, garbage out problem. You could have the best attribution models. You could have a Shapley model or Markov chain algorithmic model. Even if a last click model, a heuristic model, if you've got bad data going into it, you've got a problem, unfortunately. So what I want to share with you today is how can you overcome this? These are things that you can do in your own businesses, okay? So first of all, I just want to ask, does the data problem resonate? Is it a data problem? Does it seem like it's a data problem? Yeah, I see nods. I am curious, how many of you in here, raise your hands with pride, are using an algorithmic model like a Shapley or a Markov chain or some secret black box attribution model and not just like a last click or a multi-touch linear heuristic model? How many of you are using algorithmic attribution? Okay. 6. Okay, that's typical. That's what we see in the research as well. So let me share just really quickly. I'm going to skip this. You can have the deck if you want. We all know what the problems are associated with bad marketing data. So let me just share really quickly the 3 best practices of marketing attribution. And again, these are things that you can do with your agencies, that you can do in your own reporting environments. So number 1, standardize and predefine the tracking consistently across all channels and content touchpoints. And I'll give an example of why we want to do this on the content side. Number 2, we have to create a unified view of all customer touchpoints. We don't want to miss any touch points. If we're missing touch points, then we don't have the requisite data foundation to do holistic attribution. I'll share an example of why that's important. The third thing is, I would say, rely on algorithmic attribution models versus heuristic models. Now, if your marketing is fairly straightforward and you're not spending a whole lot of money, you can probably get away with a multilinear time decay heuristic model. And that probably may be sufficient. I wouldn't use last click, and I'll show you why. So let's look into what this looks like when we look at these. So the first thing is, and I'm going to skip through this really quickly. Number one, standardize and predefine tracking across all channels and content touchpoints. So here's why. If we look up here on this screen, it's going to be a little hard to see here. I'm going to try and zoom in. So one of the things that we say up here is not just define the channels. How many of you are familiar with UTM parameters? Raise your hands if you know what a UTM parameter is. All right, digital audience. In UTM parameters, we always define the channel or the medium, sometimes, most oftentimes, the publisher or the source. But how many of us define the content in a consistent way? Many of us don't. Well, here's why it's important to also define the content attributes or the product or the promotion attributes. So those UTM parameters or the classifications, that's what's showing up right here. Search, display, social, and what we're doing here is this is showing part of the content. So if I were to put in my classification which products I'm promoting, this happens to be a home delivery frozen smoothie and soup company. So if I need to optimize my channel for display, I want to know which product category that I define in my UTM parameters or in my classifications in my homegrown systems is working. So now I can see that the lattes and the soups and the harvest bowls within display, how they are performing. And I can see what my ROI is. And I can say, wow, I've got a $23 for every dollar I invest. I get $23 in return in lattes. Whereas it's only $16 for soups within display. Well, I've got an opportunity to optimize that. And I'm just showing this in Tableau as an example. So if we're not predefining the content or the promotions in concert with the channel touch points, we really can't optimize within the channels. And so that's a challenge. And that's really important. So all those little classifications and parameters we put in, that enables us to pivot the data and slice and dice it by those dimensions. If we don't do it, we can't optimize. So that's best practice number one, is standardize and predefine the tracking across all channels and content, all caps, content, attributes like products, promotions, campaigns. I've seen some organizations and brands, they'll do 15, 20, 30 different content parameters to really optimize all of those content and channel permutations. You get massive ability to optimize when doing so. Okay, let's move on to the next best practice. Number two, create a unified view of all customer touch points. Let's show you what this looks like. And this is what was so fascinating when we started looking into the research. So this right here represents an anonymous profile ID. This would be one person. This is a hashed ID right over here. See all those arrows associated with each of those profile IDs? Guess what those arrows represent? The touch points, the tracking IDs that we've predefined in step one. How many touch points typically precede a conversion event? Well, if you look at the research, it's about 18 across all industries and across different verticals, B2C, B2B businesses. So, if we're not able to capture each of these touch points here, then our attribution model, the data going into it, is going to be severely impacted and flawed. And I was talking with Mike Grahan last night from Acronym, and he said, this is a search summit. And he said, well, here's the wonderful thing about search. It usually starts with search, and it ends with search. This actually proves a lot of that. Okay? If you can't define your touch points, so if you look here, each of the different colors, if you look down here in the key, a little hard to read. Again, it's in the deck if you're interested in looking at this. We see display, we sell email, we see paid, we see refers, we see SEO, we see social, we see paid social, we see the website by itself. Each of those different colors represents a different channel of touch points. Okay, let me share the power. If we want to look at this not just by channel, but by publisher, what happens? Okay, this happens to be a data sanitized B2B company. So now we can see, let's look at all the touch points for Google, or for AdRoll, or for LinkedIn, or for the MSN network. So now you can see all the touch points across all your publishers where you're investing dollars, including your own websites and properties. Okay? Now you're able to really look at this. Okay, content. This is important. Let's look at, this is a B2B company. They happen to be looking at offer type. Think of this as looking at promotions or campaigns. So now they're able to say, okay, what do all the touch points look like for demos or for buyer's guides or for case studies? Now you can holistically, if you define the content attributes, you can look at all of those journey points from a content perspective. It was interesting. I had a Forrester analyst ask me one time, well, Michael, if you're able to capture all the touch points, what's the secret sauce? What does that look like? Is it display, and then website, and then email, and then search? What's the secret sauce? What's the secret cadence? And I said, well, that's like a third of the story. It's really about what was the promotion to drive awareness from a content perspective, and then what got them interested in the product category, and then what got them interested in considering the purchase, and then what got them interested, which promotion got them into convert. It's not just about the channels, it's about the content attributes. That's how we optimize this. And so anyway, that just shows the power of combining and capturing all the touch points together and doing it in the construct of not just the channels or the publishers, but also the content attributes, which are really crucial. Okay, last one. Let's look at number 3. Rely on algorithmic versus the heuristic models. Heuristic models are just rules-based. First, last, multilinear time decay. When I've made investment decisions based on algorithmic models, the lights really turn on. And it's contemplating all of the touch points. And it's assigning credit using AI. AI is a fancy way to say, as it pertains to algorithmic attribution, predictive, aka machine learning. We're taking all the inputs of the touch points, and we're looking at which of those touch points we apply credit to using mathematical models. That's all AI is as it pertains to algorithmic attribution. It's not super sophisticated. The math is actually not that hard. These models have been around since the 70s and 80s. Okay? We're just taking really good math and applying it to all of those touch point arrows that we were just showing here to assign credit. Okay, so let's look at, lastly, why is it important to rely not just on a last-click model, but maybe more of an algorithmic-driven model? So here, Again, this will be in the deck if you're interested in just evaluating what this looks like. So here we have all of our channels: search, website, social, display. And here, what we're looking at is, what does this look like on a first touch model basis? Only first touch. What do the conversions look like on a single last touch? What do the conversions look like on a last touch non-direct? What does this look like on an engagement touch? That's a different model. It's kind of assigning weighted credit. It's kind of like a U. Okay? Multilinear time decay. Okay? When we start to look at this, here's what's really interesting. So we come down here and we look at the dots. These different colors here represent the different attribution models and how we apply credit to them. And for different channels, like when we look at paid search, let's focus in on this one right here. This is really interesting. On a single last touch basis, paid search is actually getting less credit than it actually deserves. When we spread out the credit, looking at a multilinear time decay model, what we see is actually paid search actually deserves much more credit. For conversions, about 40% more. And so again, it just shows the power of not just relying on a linear touch or a last click. So these are models. You may have PhDs or have a good attribution solution that you're using. Really, it's important to move beyond last click models and some of these heuristic models. It's going to help us optimize our investments better. So these are the three areas and the three best practices. These are things that organizations can do on your own. At Strala, we automate these three things. If you're interested in talking with us, come speak. We are, like I said, since I almost got fired back in 2005, I've been on a personal crusade to eradicate the world of bad marketing measurement and bad data. So I'm happy to share those best practices with you. As a matter of fact, we've given guides, best practices guides, to solve the first best practice area, standardizing touch point. And you can take that back to your companies and say, we need to implement better tracking. And so you can do that yourselves. If you're interested in talking with us, we'd love to talk with you during the breaks. With that, thanks for your time. And